Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is the webinar about the 2022 legislative session. We'll get started in just a minute or so. Appreciate everyone being here. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So yeah, welcome. This is our first webinar of 2022. Thanks for being here. My name is Laura Ellsworth, and I'm the Strategic Partnerships and Advocacy Manager for Council for the Homeless, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Here we are again with another legislative session and advocacy kickoff. And for those of you who have previously advocated with us, thank you. And for anyone new here tonight, my hope is that after this webinar, you will have an understanding of the legislative process, our housing and homelessness policy and funding goals for this legislative session, how to advocate, and why it's so critical to our work, and how much fun it can be. We had some major wins during the last legislative session, including historic investments into the Housing Trust Fund and the first statewide just cause eviction law, and unprecedented progress in tenant protections and funding investments overall. I also want to introduce our fabulous MSW intern, Kelsey Duran, who will be helping me tonight by posting links in the chat as we go along. And she will also help me keep track of questions that come up while I'm presenting. We have a fantastic guest speaker with us tonight as well, who will be sharing her story and how becoming an advocate has impacted her life. So just a bit of housekeeping as we get started, like always. The only people that you can see and hear are our hosts and panelists tonight, so relax, you're not on camera. We will send out a recording of this webinar and post it to our website within the next week. And please help us with providing your feedback after the webinar by taking the short survey that will appear in your browser. We really do take the feedback into consideration, and it helps us plan future webinars. So tonight, we'll cover how things are set up for this year's session, give a big picture overview of the legislative process and what our housing and homelessness policy and funding asks are, how to be an advocate, and then you'll hear from our incredible guest speaker. And as always, we will end our night with some specific calls to action. Thank you for being here. So unfortunately, we are in the third calendar year of this pandemic, and in the midst of an unprecedented surge in COVID cases, this prompted the state legislature to once again go mostly virtual. So how do we advocate in a virtual world? Well, there are some definite pros and cons. No long drives to and from Olympia. You can testify on bills or submit your position on bills from the comfort of home. One of the cons is that this requires the use of technology. So I hope tonight to help you become a bit more comfortable with that and help you understand what to expect as we go through the next couple of months. So this year is what we call a short legislative session. It's only 60 days long, and that's because it's the second year of the 2-year biennial budget. This is a chance to examine the budget that was created last session and make any necessary appropriations. Most years this involves making cuts, but because budgets often come in lower than what was anticipated. But this year we do have a surplus, mostly due to unspent federal COVID relief funds. We, of course, will be advocating for a significant portion of that surplus to address the unprecedented tidal wave of need that's been created by the pandemic to be put towards affordable housing and homelessness. We are advocating mainly for the budget that the governor released, which has been very appropriate to meet the need. This is also a chance to introduce some new legislation that will help further our work and make adjustments to bills that were passed last year. You'll notice the number of bills being introduced this year is much smaller than last year, and that's due to this being a short session with less time to move things forward. It's also an election year for the entire House of Representatives and half of the state Senate, which is another motivation for legislators to get done in Olympia right on time. So here's the makeup of our state government. Think of it as a mini version of our federal government. We have 2 chambers, a House and a Senate. There are 49 legislative districts that are determined by population. And then we have from each of the 49 legislative districts, 1 senator and 2 representatives. So we have 98 state representatives and 49 state senators. Here in Clark County, we have basically 3 legislative districts that represent most of the people in our county. So therefore, we have 9 elected officials in our state legislature that represent the people of our county. So here's a just kind of quick lay of the land overview of our legislative districts in Clark County and who our representatives are in Olympia. I do want to preface this with information about recent redistricting. Based on the 2020 census, so this is every 10 years we do a census, and that counts the population, and that determines things like legislative district lines, also determines congressional district lines. And so in our county, in Clark County, the legislative district lines have been redrawn, and it's all based on population. So unfortunately, it doesn't really go into effect due to a variety of reasons and delays since the lines were drawn and the proposals have been made. And some of you who keep track of this sort of thing might have noticed in the paper, there's been a lot of back and forth. So for the purposes of this legislative session, I believe this is the lay of the land for Clark County. So here we have the 49th legislative districts and our senator and representatives and the committees that they all serve on. And you're going to hear a little bit more about why these committees are important to pay attention to when we're doing our advocacy. I want to point out these key committees for these specific representatives in our community. The Rules Committee is it determines whether and in what order to schedule bills for consideration on the floor of the House. And it reviews, adopts, and schedules consideration of floor resolutions. And the Appropriations Committee considers bills with operating budget and fiscal impacts. So you're going to hear more about why that's important for the advocacy work that we have ahead of us this year. The 17th legislative district is mostly suburban. It encompasses the area east of 205 and north to the southern edge of Battleground. And key committees for this group of legislators include Appropriations and Rules for Representative Harris and Ways and Means for Senator Wilson. And then the 18th legislative district, while it covers the most amount of space in the county, it's mostly rural and encompasses North and East County, wrapping down into Philida and Salmon Creek. And again, these are the old lines, but I believe for this session, these are the ones we're working with. So key committees for this group of legislators include Appropriations for Representative Huff and Rules and Ways and Means for Senator Rivers. So again, let's go back briefly to the Rules Committee. It's where leadership exercises the most control over the process. It's made up of members of both parties, and each member on the committee gets to select 2 or 3 bills that will move on to the next step in the process. So you can see how being in the majority can help influence which bills get considered and which bills don't. Okay, here we go. So this is a very high level, basic, pared down overview of how a bill becomes a law. And you can see that the bill kind of starts out, just hanging out there, real comfortable, real happy. just a bill, and then he kind of goes through some rough stuff, and then comes out at the end just looking sharp and looking intact and just great. So I'll kind of go over what happens throughout the course of a legislative session to pass a bill. And I also want to point out that everything that this bill is going to go through has a chance to get killed at any step in the process. So here we go. So a bill gets introduced by a representative or a senator. It then gets referred to the appropriate committee for a hearing. And then it gets its hearing and it gets amended or not and voted on in the committee, whether or not to go to a vote of the entire chamber, where once it's passed, then it will get sent over to the other chamber to go through that same process all over again. So once it goes through this process and it gets passed out of each chamber, so sometimes bills are introduced in the House and then they pass out of the House and get heard in the Senate, and they each have their own numbers associated with it in the House and the Senate. Both sides kind of negotiate and they have to agree on a final version. And once each version in each chamber gets passed, it gets sent to the governor for an action. And so the governor could decide to sign it into law. He could veto it, he or she. He could veto part of it or all of it. And sometimes if the governor vetoes a bill, the legislature can override the veto with a majority vote, although that rarely happens. So all of this to say, it's very difficult to pass a bill, and our founding fathers made it that way intentionally. And again, this is just a very pared down process, but I wanted you to kind of know the very basics of how it works, because as you go through a legislative session, you'll notice a lot of twists and turns and a lot of action needed, advocacy needed, steps taken. And sometimes it's all with very short notice and shifting messaging. And this is basically why. So hopefully that gives you kind of a basic idea. All right, so let's talk about our lead agenda for this year. Council for the Homeless works in conjunction with the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance to advocate for funding and policies that help prevent homelessness and move people from homelessness to housing. So our priorities this year include $500 million in the capital budget for affordable homes. We've had historic investments into the Housing Trust Fund in recent years, which has brought us many more affordable housing and permanent supportive housing in our community, like developments like the Pacific and the Elwood and more in the works. We're also asking for an increase in the aged, blind, and disabled cash grant from $197 to $417 per month. And these are funds for people who qualify for Social Security and act as a bridge while people are waiting for that approval. I don't need to tell you that $197 a month isn't enough for income for someone who is disabled and unable to work and waiting on SSDI. We're also asking for $2 million for pre-eviction civil aid and additional $1.3 million for tenants' rights to counsel. This will help address some of the need that continues to exist despite the passage of right to counsel last session. Then we have $4.5 million for foreclosure prevention. So homeowners have also been ravaged by the pandemic too, and this will help protect homeowners from foreclosure, therefore preventing people from falling into homelessness. We're asking for $78 million in the operating budget to sustain and build capacity for permanent supportive housing and homeless service providers. One thing that we've heard loud and clear throughout the state from all of the service providers here locally is A, how much we need more permanent supportive housing, and B, we need the workforce to support it. So we also have a few bills this session, and Kelsey's going to post these in the chat for you to take a look at. The link in the chat for each bill will actually take you to the bill tracker on our state legislative website. And you can keep referring back to this page, and you can just enter in the specific bill number and keep track throughout the session. There's a good little graph at the bottom that kind of shows you like where in the process the bill is whenever you look it up. So that's another way you can kind of get an idea too about the process. So first we have the Housing Justice Act, that's House Bill 2017. And this is a bill that will reduce barriers to housing for people who have been engaged with the criminal legal system. It prevents landlords from categorically denying tenancy for people with an arrest or conviction record. We anticipate that this bill will be scheduled for a hearing soon. And so you'll hear more about A, just how to testify remotely, and B, we will stay in touch with you all to ask you to testify or register your support for the bill. We are also advocating for the real estate excise tax bill, otherwise known as the REIT bill. That's House Bill 1643. And that is an incentive to sell for property owners to sell to affordable housing providers and local housing authorities, and would exempt the seller from the REIT tax. So this is actually a bill that was passed in 2020, but the governor vetoed it. So remember I said earlier about the vetoes. He was supportive of the bill, but he vetoed it as the legislature was about to adjourn for the year in anticipation of a reduced revenue from COVID. So again, just another example of how, we do these 2-year budgets and then things change. And that was in anticipation of not having enough funds and the impact of the pandemic, which at the time, was much more unknown, the financial impact to our state revenue. There were no federal relief dollars that were guaranteed at that point. So we're advocating for that again this year. And then lastly, we have an anti-rent gouging bill, House Bill 1904. This bill actually had its hearing this morning at 8 a.m. And this is an important bill that will provide tenants with 6 months notice of rent increases of 3% or more. We've heard consistently throughout this last year about people's rent being raised astronomically. And so this doesn't prevent landlords from raising the rent, but it does give tenants more time to prepare. And it's just critical because tenants across the state are receiving massive rent increases with only 60 days notice, and 60 days is not enough time to prepare for a significant increase, nor is it enough time to even move if you're going to have to find a new place to live. So one of the things we can do more easily this year is testify on a bill that's being heard, or you can submit written testimony, or just simply state whether you are pro or con on certain bills. And this is something that you may be asked to do as a housing advocate this session. So I'll walk you through the process here, and Kelsey's gonna post this information in the chat so you can get an idea of how it works. But this website, app.ledge.wa.gov/CSI. This link will become your best friend this legislative session. So just imagine all the miles that you are not driving to and from Olympia, because this is how you can actually be in the room with lawmakers as they consider our bills. So basically, you'll go to this website and it will ask you to select the House or the Senate, and for the specific committee where the bill is being heard. And don't worry, you'll be provided with all of that information beforehand by myself or from representatives from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. So we'll give you a step-by-step instruction of how that, what that information is when the time comes. Then you'll select the specific agenda item or bill you would like to either testify remotely on, submit a written position on, or submit a written statement for. So again, there's a few ways you can participate and interact through this this portal through our state legislature's webpage. And depending on what it is, how things are going, what bill is being heard, what the what's happening with it, you could be asked to do all 3 things or just one of those things. But or you can just choose whichever one that you're, most comfortable with. So when you do this, then you'll be asked to provide your contact information. And it's really important. I want you to know that 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 this information is public record. So if you don't feel safe disclosing your address, you can put decline in the address field, but please do make sure that you put your city and zip code in there so that lawmakers know which part of the state you're from. It also helps them know, like, hey, this is my constituent that's taking the time to provide this testimony, and that is super powerful. For those that are signing up for remote testimony, you'll get emailed a link that's unique to you. And that's the link that you'll want to use to log in to provide testimony. And it's similar in how this webinar is. You'll start out and you'll only see like whoever's talking on screen. Usually it's the person running the meeting. And then when it gets close to your turn to testify, it'll change and invite you to be a different attendee. And then you'll see like all the legislators that are there. It'll become like all the little Brady Bunch boxes and you'll see everybody, and then you'll just unmute yourself like you normally would in a Zoom meeting, say your testimony, and then you'll go back to being an attendee again, just like as if you're on a webinar instead of a meeting. So it's really powerful because, you'll log into these meetings and you'll see your legislators, one of those 9 people that I just reviewed earlier. And it's kind of cool, and sometimes, even, they might know you, they might say hi. I mean, it's just kind of a cool way to virtually participate in the legislative process. So that's remote testimony in a nutshell. And maybe Mercedes might have some experience with this and can talk about it when she's up as well. But, bills are being heard all the time. We also have support agenda items that we're, advocating for as well. Bills are on different schedules. There's different hearings. They'll be at different places in the legislative process throughout the legislative session. So just be prepared. But whatever comes through the pipeline in terms of what advocacy we're asking, we will make it very clear and as easy as possible for you to just follow a step-by-step process to participate over Zoom. So it's very powerful and it's just a huge help. And I do want to say one quick note about signing in as pro or con on bills. It takes just like a few minutes, and like last session, it kind of turned into this big thing where like sometimes like there would be like thousands of people testifying pro or con, where you're just basically choosing an option and that's all you're doing. You're not attending the meeting, you're not saying anything in person or, over Zoom, but it's really become a powerful tool to illustrate a lot of support or a lot of pushback against bills. And so please know that that is, just a really important thing to take part in, and it's really easy. Okay, actually, I do want to pause here because that was a lot and I want to open it up to questions. So Kelsey, was there anything that I missed in the chat?
Yeah, so we actually got a great question about once a committee has had a hearing on a bill, can we still provide written testimony?
That is a great question. Let me get back to you on that. Unless
Okay.
Mercedes, you happen to know.
I do not know the answer to that. I always thought it was 1 hour before the hearing, but I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I'll find that out and get back. Who asked that question?
It was one of the panelists.
Oh, okay, got it. Awesome.
And an additional part, is there a cutoff or deadline, I guess, which was kind of included in that for that written testimony?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll find out. I'll find out about that.
Okay, and then Gary asked if you knew anything about when ABD was last increased.
Thanks for that question, Gary. Yes, I believe that it was just increased. It was either last session or the one before. And it was increased like a whopping $50 or something a month. So I think it went up from like 120-ish to 170-ish. So yeah. Yeah. So this is a big ask, but again, it's still far behind what the need is compared to previous years. So.
And it looks like somebody's needing a little bit of clarification on the district thing. I know it's super complicated with how it just got rewritten, but it's like, no, it's not real yet. So do you think you could go back over that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So the districts were redrawn. There's just been all kinds of hangups about people people agreeing on the options that are out there. And I think I just saw something in the paper today about it getting, I don't know. Actually, no, that was the county council, not the state districts. So they were redrawn based on the census. However, for this session, because of the process that it has to go through to get approved by the state legislature, because that's not happening until sometime later in the legislative session, for all intents and purposes, we need to advocate for, in the districts that we're already in. And again, going back, I think Kelsey posted it in the chat earlier, you can look up your legislative district through that tool through the state legislative website, ledge.wa.gov. And then I think there's a button that says like, find my district.
It looks like that was it for questions, unless anybody else wants to throw anything in. And Elizabeth wanted to shout out how easy the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance makes it to advocate. And so I don't know if you want me to post the link for that to sign up now, Laura, or if you want me to wait a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and wait a little bit on that. Thank you, though. Thank you, Beth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Cool. Well, now I would like to share with you all. We had a guest tonight, Po Leapai from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. Unfortunately, he got called away to another meeting, actually a meeting like with the governor's task force on policing, I believe. But I wanted to share one of the projects he's working on. It's a really exciting and creative way to get involved this session. And it's called Stories for Change. It's a photo voice action plan. So this is from Poe. He says, this is an invitation to engage in the housing movement by sharing your story in a different way. We hope the result will be a massive display depicting what is happening in real life to community members all over the state of Washington. There is power in organizing through creativity and art and through visuals and audio. We need to remind lawmakers who they represent and to tell them what we need. So I am going to share a little bit about that project here. And Kelsey is going to post this in the chat again, because it's kind of a lot. But basically, you can take a photo that helps tell your story. It can be a selfie of you holding a sign. It can just be a picture of a sign, something about your experience or beliefs. For example, housing is healthcare. Never before has that been more evident than during a global pandemic. Or my rent was raised by $100, or I was evicted during the pandemic. If you don't want to be in the picture, you can just take a picture of your words, but please make sure there are no other people or personal information in the photos. Then you can text or email those photos. And there's a phone number that you can text to or an email address if you prefer, and just give them your name and your city, or if you would just prefer to remain anonymous. So this is going to be a really cool thing. Poe is like a musician. He's got this creative background, and he's going to put everything together in this really professional and like audio like this audio visual way that only he understands. But yes, so does anyone have any questions about this right now? And I can definitely pass on any questions to Poe as well. And again, he was super sorry to miss this. So I see the question from Paula. Yeah, so the formula, so for housing to be deemed affordable, it should be no more than 30%. That like your mortgage or your rent should be no more than 30% of your income. But the reality is most people pay a lot more higher of a percentage of their income towards housing, and we call that being cost burdened. And that's what makes people more at risk for falling into homelessness and to experience housing insecurity, is when they have less of that remaining income to act as a safety net for them. Okay, any other questions about the Photo Voice Action Project? I think this is a really neat, creative way to engage this legislative session. And apparently we have an artistic expert on our side that is going to create something extremely powerful and moving for our lawmakers to consider. So please do feel free to be a part of that. Okay, so our other guest tonight is Mercedes Whitecalf, and she's here to share her journey with advocacy and what it has meant for her life, as well as how this housing and homelessness agenda is so impactful to our Indigenous community. Although experiencing oppression and institutional racism throughout her entire life as an Indigenous and African American woman, Mercedes has been afforded opportunities to succeed and flourish. This was largely due to the support and largely due to the support and efforts of passionately engaged Native American and BIPOC community leaders. The efforts of such leaders positively impacted the trajectory of her education, career, and purpose in life. Her cultural identity as the driving force behind the commitment and dedication she has for social change, equity, and cultural restoration. She relishes the opportunity to bring the knowledge and experience she gains back to serve her community at any capacity of liberation and restoration. Ultimately, she desires to influence and co-create laws and policies that redeem, restore, and empower her community. Her work is dedicated to ending all forms of oppression. So Mercedes, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. And how many minutes do I have? I think it's 15. Okay.
Oh, yep, 20 to 15 to 20.
Okay, sounds good. So my name's Mercedes Whitecalf. I'm really happy to be here. I'll start with a little bit about my life, my background, my upbringing. I'm half Native American and half Black. My mother was born in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. She's Oglala Sioux. She grew up on a reservation. She attended boarding school in the 50s, and she was relocated here to Astoria, Oregon, and then eventually moved to Eugene, Oregon, and then Portland, Oregon, and then I moved on to Vancouver, Washington. So growing up, I was really, really, really poor. And I luckily had places like NAIA, which I work for now, the Native American Youth and Family Center, that had a bunch of community members from the Native community and from the BIPOC community that would come in and tutor us, give us food boxes, sign us up for like gifts around Christmas times, because they knew what we were facing. Unfortunately, my mom was heavily in her addiction, her drug addiction. And so them stepping up in that role definitely helped me out. And they definitely worked with us. What ended up happening is I kind of just threw myself into school, because a lot of my mentors made it clear to me that, Mercedes, if you go to school and you get involved, like you can make changes and you can make a way for yourself out of poverty. And so then I would do that in high school, and I was getting good grades, and I was joining all like Constitution Court, mock trial, things like that. I was always, I don't know what it was, I was always into policy, because I think I always felt disenfranchised. Like I always felt like I had the shorter end of the stick, or I was some kind of afterthought, and I didn't know why. And those things make me feel like I had a fighting chance to show myself that that's not true. So I got involved in activities in high school, and then a teacher, or he was like a mentor teacher, he told me that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has a scholarship, and they fund Native Americans who are enrolled and their family makes less than like $10,000 a year, which mine did. That's crazy. And had like an incarcerated parent or close loved one. And I met all the categories, but you only had to meet one. And he said, you could apply with your GPA and, your level of community service and stuff. And have you thought about college? And I never thought about college. So I didn't even know that was something I could do. And I applied, I got the scholarship, and I ended up going to University of Oregon. But there's a bunch of loopholes there. When I got there, I had financial aid, and the financial aid and the first day of school, those dates didn't line up. So I found myself homeless when I first got to college. Also, I attended a high school that was not well funded. I think we maybe had one computer in the class. Like I remember seeing one computer aside from, my teachers. And so I didn't type a lot. And my first paper I turned in was to a professor, and I handwritten it. I handwrote it, and he laughed at me. And I didn't know, and it devastated me. And eventually, I got out of that. But what ended up happening is it took me 8 years to get a 4-year degree. I was disqualified from the University of Oregon 3 times academically. And they told me on the last time, we're not sure how you were admitted back in after your first disqualification, but if you do not graduate this term or this year with a B average, like you can't come back here. And I was a student that struggled. So what that meant was I had 60 credits left, and I would have to take 20 credits each term and get a B average. I had never even taken 12 credits and got a C average, so it was really, really hard for me. But when I graduated, I had a 4.025 in my major department. And I still cannot believe it. I got an A in every single class because I was that determined. I'll also say 3 months out of those 9 months, I was homeless. And what I would do is I would sleep in my car, and I would go to the YMCA. They charge $1.50 to go in. I would shower, not work out, get ready for school, go to class, hang out in the library until about 10 or 11. Then I would go find my car, go park it somewhere way where, there was really no one at, which is probably dangerous, sleep, and do it all over again because I was that determined to graduate. And I'm not saying that, to pride myself. I'm saying that to kind of paint a picture of how hard it is for people like us, like me. And everybody doesn't have the ability to do that, And so while I was at the University of Oregon, I ran for Student Senate, and I got Senate Seat 1, which is Programs and Finance Committee. And I found out, what was happening is I was walking to and from school, and I would see this nice building in the center, and it would be all these kids, students, they're kids to me now, all these students running around and looking important and handing each other documents, and some of them wore suits sometimes, and I was like, I'll never be able to go in there with those kind of people. And then one day I just came and I asked, and I said, what is this? And they said, this is student gov. And it meant student government. And right here, you're standing where student senators meet. And that's how I got involved. And later I got involved in the Black Student Union and the Native American Student Union. And then I went on to run for Senate Seat 1, and I was elected. And then when I got there, I found out we had this $1.5 million budget where students get to decide where that money goes. And it was going to things like things that definitely I did not see. People like me did not see. And I wanted to kind of, I wanted to make a change. And I did that. And I sat at those tables. There's 20 of us. And I felt way out of my league. I didn't have, an education the way some of these students had. And some of them were in law school. Some of them were getting their masters, so I got a taste of that. And I wanted it, I wasn't really sure how or why, but I knew that I wanted to do that. So when I graduated, I ended up working at a law firm and buying a brand new car and stuff like that. But what I found, in all honesty, is that I thought that if I graduated college, because I'm the first person to ever graduate college in my family, I thought that if I graduated college and I worked at a law firm and I got a brand new leased car off the lot, that I would be happy. But what I found is I was even more miserable than before, because now I had the things that I was hoping for, and I still felt empty inside. And And without disclosing too much, I definitely used alcohol and drugs to try and fill that void. And I found myself homeless. My mother she had gotten clean when I was 13 years old, and she had 13 years clean, and she relapsed after a knee surgery. And she overdosed 10 months later, and they found her, and I was devastated because my intention was to go to law school, fight for our treaties, fight for our rights to, to get our treaties honored. I was going to buy her a house because she was so upset that we had to buy a house on our own land. And I was going to buy her a house, and I was going to help her write the book, The Story of Her Life. And I had all these plans. But when they called me and said she died, it's like the world stopped for a second. And I thought, Mom, you gave out on me. I was almost there. But the truth was that wasn't really accurate. I was on drugs. I was living in South Central Los Angeles, and I was homeless, and I lost that brand new car due to my addiction. And I was running with people that were not good to me. And I ended up getting kidnapped and attempted to be sex trafficked. And that, yeah, there are people on this earth that there is pure evil that goes on. I'll say that. So I was homeless there. I was, I cut off my hair. I had got body lice. Like, it was bad. I lived on Skid Row. And I mean, I remember I couldn't even get 35 cents together to buy a cup of noodles. Like, it was that bad. And I remember riding on the trains and the buses, and the bus drivers would feel bad for me. And I would say, like, hey, can I stay on the bus, overnight? Because their buses ran 24 hours just to stay safe, because they knew what was out there, at night, and they would. And I remember praying and looking up in the sky and saying, God, like, help me, and so, but I was still heavily addicted on drugs, and I don't think I was ready to give it up. So fast forward, I eventually came back to Portland, Oregon, and I stayed in a shelter. And then I found the shelters would kind of kick me out. It would be, I don't get along with the staff. They're touching my stuff while they kick me out. I said something back, or, things like that. And I ended up in a underneath the bridge, and like all those people that sleep under the bridge that kind of urinate on themselves and they have sleeping bags, I always looked at them and I said, I will never be that. But in my honest heart of heart, those people, that first night that I stayed out in the streets when it was snowing, they kept me alive. They taught me, how to cover up in a garbage bag and then a sleeping bag, and put hand sanitizer on the ground and light it on fire, stay warm, until the night or till the daytime came. And I never thought I'd see myself there, but I was. And so it got bad. I was living in tents. I was part of the camps, and I would be trying to keep a tent and then go get in a soup line and get some food. And by the time I come back, they've already swept and they've taken all our stuff and they've thrown it away, because, to the sweepers, our stuff is junk. But there were things from my mother in there that I'll never see again. But the truth is, I put myself in that situation. So I eventually, it got really bad, and I got to the point I said, okay, God, I don't know if you got something against me or you brought me here just to humiliate me and be like, have a punching bag, but my mom didn't raise me like this. And I'm a disgrace to my family and the legacy of my family, because my family, they were people who were they were hunted by the government, by the federal government, and they ran barefoot with their children. Like, I cannot imagine having a child in my hand and one in, holding my hand, running barefoot, being hunted by the federal government so that they could continue to be a free tribe. And here I am, I can't even get out of, homelessness. And I internalized it. So I said, God, if this is all you have for me, just kill me and make it not hurt. And I'm going to speed this up because I see time. Okay, so I prayed that prayer, and 3 weeks later I got clean. And so I stayed in a tent and I was clean, and I was going to recovery meetings all around downtown. I went back and forth between Portland, Oregon and Vancouver, Washington. And then I got into a treatment center, and then they helped me. I stayed there. I didn't really plan on staying long. I thought it was a 30-day program, and then they were like, no, this is a 7-month program. And I was like, I don't know about that, but I stayed, and I ended up staying there for 14 months. But when I left, I had a job as a janitor, and I had a home. And then I got a job as a housing specialist. And when I got that job as the housing specialist, I was able to have a caseload of domestic violence survivors and survivors of human trafficking like myself, flee and get a home. And then also, find some support and foundation to build a new life for yourself. Because sometimes when you're in those situations, you feel so ashamed of what has happened to you, you honestly don't feel like you're worthy of anything else. And being there with those women and being able to counsel them, that was wonderful. But some things were happening in the nonprofit organizations, while I was making sure that there was rental assistance and, securing housing for my clients and my caseload, I was 2 months behind in my rent. And I didn't know how to articulate that. I didn't even know what that meant. I felt like I was failing as a person. I didn't know that there was a whole system that operated this way, and I was just a part of it. And there's millions others people who are like that too, but we kind of tend to be secretive because poverty is like a moral deficiency in the eyes of the society, but it's not, and it doesn't have to be, and it's not going to be. Eventually I found that job, although I could provide those people with rental assistance from what was given to me, there is a table somewhere up there where these people are deciding what that amount is going to be, who it's going to go to, how much, all of the stipulations over it. And I felt like they damn sure better have someone like me at the table. And come to find out they didn't. And so I got to the point where I was like, if I made it out of what I made it out of, I'll be damned if I'll come here and I'll be afraid of this majority ran government and feel like I can't take a part in a government that is mirrored from a Native American tribe, right? The Iroquois Nation. So I got involved. I applied for NAIA, and which was like a full circle because these were the same mentors and the people that poured into me as a kid, but we went from a basement in a church. They're now like we're like an $11 million organization with 150 staff. So I was happy to come on. I'm so happy. I love my job, but I'm an advocacy coordinator. And what that looked like in the beginning for me, I'm really going to speed this up. I'm so sorry, Laura. What that looked like in the beginning for me, like I've been here.
You can go till 6:25.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So when I got there into advocacy and policy work, I didn't really know what to do, but I asked them to just take a chance on me because my passion and my drive would definitely take me the way I needed to go, and everything else, you're going to have to train someone anyway. So just train me, and I did my due diligence and I did my research. And if you would have asked me 7 months ago what a bill is, I would have said, it's the thing that comes to your house that you don't want to pay. I didn't know. And I have a boss who I was able to say that to, and he would explain to me just how we learned today. It's just an idea. And then someone that, says, okay, let's draft this idea. And then we have elected officials that put their stamp on it and say, okay, we're going to help you guys bring this idea because we're all in one community. And he showed me, how things go. And then I, in turn, hosted Advocacy 101 events for my community, so I could tell them too, there's things that we can change in our community. In my community on the African American side as well as the Native American side doesn't trust the government, and for good reason. However, like even with the presidential elections, I was like, that electoral thing with Trump, I don't even know what that was. But on a state, county, and city level, we can definitely make change. And I reached out. I just started looking at nonprofit organizations advocacy, and I would find all of them in Southwest Washington, and I would write them and tell them who I was, and that I didn't know much, but I wanted to be a part of the legislative session and what can I do? And they welcomed me right in, and they also educated me, and they also mentored me. And fast forwarding now, there's some bills that have happened, and this one, I really like this one, and I'm going to what I wrote because I testified on this bill on behalf of my organization. And so this was House Bill 1816. So like I said, frontline housing service providers, people that are working with people who are homeless and stuff like that. Sometimes, well, oftentimes we're helping those people and we don't even have housing ourselves, or we don't have stable housing ourselves. And no one ever says anything about it. Well, with this bill, someone said we have to do something about it, and it's going to be a budget ask. We're going to put some money in the budget, and that's what we're going to ask, from our legislative officials. And it's called House Bill 1816. And this was my testimony. Whoops. Okay. And again, I didn't know how to write or anything, how a testimony went. I didn't know how many minutes or how it was supposed to go, but they had workshops and they taught us how to write and tell our story in a way that was effective and powerful and meaningful. So listen. Hello, co-chairs and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mercedes Whitecalf, and I am testifying today on behalf of the NAIA Action Fund located in Southwest Washington. As someone who works for nonprofits that offer supportive and permanent housing, it has been my experience that organizations perish due to inadequate funding. Although utilizing every dollar allotted, service providers inevitably experience workforce shortages. To best address this and potentially end the workforce and homelessness crisis, we must invest in the retention and the sustainability of the workers and providers we need most. The NAIA Action Fund was created to provide culturally specific advocacy, policy, and community engagement programs, guiding our people in the direction of personal success and balance through cultural empowerment. Because of that reason, the NAIA Action Fund supports House Bill 1816, and we ask that you too support making 2021 to 2023 fiscal biennium supplemental operating appropriations. Thank you for your time. It was that simple, right?
That's awesome. What bill was it again? What's the bill number? I think I posted one in the chat that was not correct.
House Bill 1816. Yeah, we've had our hearing for it. And so then I did the same thing for House Bill 1904, which is anti-rent gouging, because that's on our agenda. And what happened, like with my organization, they said, okay, look, this is how my job even came about. We were making way and providing a place for ourselves to flourish, the Native American community in Oregon. And we said that we wanted to do the same thing in Washington. And we got funding to go in and support bills that benefited our people and endorse elected officials who were running, so that would care about the issues we care about. And we had an agenda in the areas were education, workforce, or like economic development, housing, homelessness, environmental, and climate, and then health and wellness. And so we have some bills. One of the things that we're supporting is the salmon recovery bill. Our Governor Inslee has asked for $187 million for salmon recovery. So we're supporting that. House Bill 1725, that is asking for a special task force to be applied for missing and Indigenous women, because we have the highest rates, and to pay special attention because they don't pay attention to us. Like I said, often an afterthought. And so we support those. There are a couple others, and I could put them in the chat. I think the biggest thing about advocacy, about getting involved, is knowing that we can really change. I know it sounds so cliche, like we really can make a change, but when you think about it, it's probably like advocacy and making a change, it doesn't feel like it in the moment. But I think about like people like Harriet Tubman, when she was running to the north to get her freedom barefoot, she knew there was a possibility she might die and nothing would ever change. But she knew there was a possibility that things might change. Same thing with Crazy Horse from my tribe. He fought for his people, and he knew it was a possibility that they would all die. But he knew there was also a possibility that we wouldn't, and that we would live on, and our culture would be not a mystery, because of the legacy. And that's why I'm here. I really want to empower people. Like there's a bill that we didn't end up drafting it in time, but there's a bill that we want to do, raising the minimum wage, like raise it to $20, raise it to $25. That's what I wanted to say. So what I noticed is being in policy, so everywhere. What I noticed in policy, see, I always thought America was broke. I was like, oh, we don't have any money. We don't have any money. We can't afford this. And then I get into policy and advocacy and even listen to the news, and we got $1 trillion here, $1 billion here, you know, even in rental assistance, which is fine, you know, but I'm thinking, where did all this money come from? I thought we were broke. And our communities have always been fighting for the scraps, you know, instead of saying, no, we need a bigger budget. So that's another reason why I'm here. And one thing that really, why I stay, because like something that happened today when we were testifying, there was this guy who he said he felt like he was being like brutally attacked because he's not allowed to increase rent over 3% within a 60-day period, because, you know, landlords are increasing rent 60%, 50%, you know, high rates. And he doesn't feel that he should have to do that, you know, with 6 months notice. And he said the answer and the solution to this homelessness crisis was more funding for rental assistance. And I thought, well, of course, because all that money goes to you, you know, but I wouldn't understand those things if I weren't here, and I wouldn't get to empower, you know, you and everyone around me, you know, if I wasn't here. So I learned it's really not about me. It's just to show up, you know, and show people like, okay, this is where I was and this is where I got to. And I just tried, you know, and I didn't give up, and I didn't feel like someone had more of a right to be somewhere because of the way they looked. And yeah, I had to totally decolonize my mind. And I work on that every day. But I know that changes are coming, and I'm going to be a part of them. And I hope you guys are too, because we need help. We need we need this. We need everyone. Everyone has something to offer, you know. So
thank you so much. That's awesome. I've just kind of been looking at the chat, and you have a lot of fans out there. And real quick, I see Jennifer's got her hand up. Jennifer, let's see. Did you have something that you wanted to say? You can go ahead and unmute if you'd like.
I probably did it because I was walking down the stairs, so no, I didn't actually put my hand up. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. All right, great. All right, well, I'm going to just wrap us up here tonight, and thank you again, Mercedes. Honestly, yeah, I just see the interconnectedness of just all of the experiences that you have had, and you know, also I hear the kindness of people interwoven throughout, and your just resiliency and perseverance, and we are all honored that you shared your story with us tonight. And I just want to acknowledge the emotional labor that you have put into our evening together. And thank you so much for that. So I will go ahead and return us to the end of our evening together here and start to wrap things up with our call to action. So I'm hopeful that you all have a better understanding of the legislative process and this year's advocacy and policy agenda. We've given you some specific ways, and Mercedes just showed you how to take action through testimony. I also want to plug our housing and homelessness advocacy days, which are February 1st through the 3rd, and Kelsey is going to post the link to that in the chat. So I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight to seek knowledge. Please do share it, engage with elected officials about investments into low income and affordable housing, and about how to create places for people who don't have housing to be. Everyone needs to be somewhere, even those without homes. They will in fact be somewhere. And we as a community can really help our lawmakers be bold in their funding and solutions to make life better for all of us by truly addressing the issues that matter to all of us, housed or unhoused. We are all in this together. So please continue to think critically about homelessness. I know that it can feel uncomfortable, and it can sometimes raise really tough questions and emotions. And if you haven't already, please sign up for our advocacy action alerts through the Council for the Homeless website. This is our primary way to engage and inform during the legislative session and beyond. We share this every webinar, but this in particular, this pertains exactly to the work that we are doing this legislative session. So please do sign up for that if you haven't already. As always, please share the data, the facts, dispel myths, reduce the stigma of homelessness. And last but definitely not least, as always, be kind, be kind to people on the streets, in cars and camps or in shelter. We really look forward to seeing you again. I want to thank our incredible guest tonight, Mercedes, who so generously shared her expertise and experience. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll look forward to advocating with you in the coming weeks. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.